The world is never going to be the same again.
I'm worried about the world.
The mass chaos and crises that there was in the world, it's going to be just like that now.
This is not an accident.
How long is it going to last? Longer than even for those of you that have some cash in the bank, way past your cash reserves.
Out of 100 people, 4 will get the message.
This thing isn't going to be over in a few weeks. This thing isn't going to be over in a few months.
Gold just passed $2,000 an ounce, setting the stage for a historic new bull run. Multiple billionaire investors are loading up on gold, including hedge fund founder Ray Dalio and real estate mogul Sam Zell, meaning now is the time to own gold. One precious metals expert is stepping forward with a big prediction. He believes we could see gold reach as high as $3,000 by the end of the year, possibly higher. So find out why and get instant access to his #1 gold investment for 2022. It's not bullion, an ETF, or a mining stock. In the past, folks using the same gold strategy could have been able to make nearly 50 times their initial investment. Considering how quickly the price of gold has been moving, you don't want to waste any time missing out on the gains he believes are in store for this investment. So to get a copy of his new free report with all the details, simply go to 2022goldmania.com. Again, that's 2022goldmania.com for a free copy of his new report. Hi, this is Daniela Cambone, and welcome back to Stansberry Research. We are talking the latest figures in regards to GDP in the U.S. It declined at a 1.4% pace in the first quarter, below analyst expectations of a 1% gain. So is this just noise or a signal that we're entering a recession? Joining me here to talk about this today and so much more is our fairy godmother of the economic and financial landscape, Lynette Zhang. She is the chief market strategist over at ITM Trading. Lynette, it is always such a delight to be reunited with you. Welcome back.
Well, you're one of my favorite people too, so I'm very happy to be here, Daniela. Thank you for having me back.
Well, we got a lot of ground to cover, as I always say. So let's start with the GDP numbers, or the percentage and the pace at which it's going at here. I love how you've been tweeting all these headlines and then just doing hashtag got gold. But first and foremost, is it noise to you? Is this headline noise to you, or a true signal that we're headed for a recession?
We are getting so many true signals that not only are we heading into a recession, but there's no doubt in my mind, and I'm really sorry to say it, but I think we've begun the hyperinflationary depression. That's the next step.
So let's talk about that, because we hear all these terms thrown at us, right? Superinflation, stagflation, hyperinflation. Everyone has a thesis around it. I'd like to get yours. Why this label for you?
Well, number one, and I think a good differentiation between all of those is simply the speed of the inflation and the level of economic growth. But here's the problem. The government and the central banks, rather, have really used a big part of the inflation to say this is what's happening with GDP. So the fact that we had in the first quarter, it declined by 1.25% when we have inflation officially running at 8.5% is frankly very worrisome. Now, why they want to say it's noise is because of all of the checkable deposits that are in the system. So the theory is that the consumer is really strong. Well, I think it depends on which part of the economy you're in, because let us not forget that K-shaped recovery. And also with the dollar against other currencies being really strong, right? What does that do to our exports versus our imports, right? Makes imports look cheaper. But it's all really a game, and I don't think this is noise.
So you're saying it's a game hiding something?
Yeah. I mean,
To say the very least.
to say the very least. I mean, what do we hear? The dollar just hit a 20-year high against key trading partners. So the yen, the euro, etc. Well, at the same time that the inflation is raging here in food, in housing, in really everything, the services sector, right across the board. Well, how come if our dollar is so strong, how come our purchasing power is so weak? So
Exactly. Yeah, I'm scratching my head over that, every day. So like you said, the purchasing power keeps diminishing. US dollar keeps making higher highs. How does this play out? What gives? What happens? How long can that go on for?
Well, see, and that's the whole point, isn't it? If we truthfully have 3 cents left, and you look at the rate of the devaluation, so the purchasing power declining, that's really the trend. But if they can make the stock market look like it's high and say, look at this is making new highs, or they can make the dollar against other currencies, because that's what that refers to, then people are going, oh, well, the dollar is strong. I mean, it creates,
A perception.
Oh, definitely. Yes, absolutely. But in the reality is that what matters is what you can buy with those dollars. And I think that now that it's running fast enough for people to actually notice it, it's a big problem. Because what are they really concerned about? De-anchoring of inflation expectations, not inflation itself.
Which will lead me to my next point, because the Fed will say, well, we're tackling it. We keep raising interest rates here. We're going to fight this inflation. How successful will they be with the tightening?
They won't be. They will not be successful with the tightening because, number one, it's a different kind of inflation. It's a supply side inflation versus a demand side inflation. And on top of that, even if they do a series for the rest of the year of 50-point rate hikes, the interest rate will still be below the level of inflation, even their reported inflation, which of course is when you're out there buying food and anything else, it's much higher than that 8.5%.
So you're saying we're just too behind the curve to do anything. We perhaps should have started this 10 years ago?
Yeah, but where were we, right? I mean, people think, or they want the perception to be that this is something different, but the system died in 2008, and this is the very end of it. And I feel like we are lurching from crisis to crisis to crisis, which keeps everybody off balance. And then when we get this final black swan crisis, which the interest rate, increasing the interest rates 50 basis points at every meeting could certainly be that black swan. I don't think they can do it. I think they have to do it for their credibility, but I think they're going to have a pivot real fast.
And let me ask you this, throw into the mix now the Shanghai lockdowns, right? So we saw with the first wave where the lockdown started, is it a concern for you that this is going to come back again, that we're going, it starts in Shanghai and then slowly makes its way back to us?
I don't think so. And here's something I'll just kind of throw out there, and I can't prove this, so this is just my opinion.
Okay.
Right? I can't prove this.
Disclaimer, folks, disclaimer.
Yes, definitely a disclaimer. But I'm not 100% convinced that the crisis that's happening over in the other part of the world isn't part of this whole transition. Because they're all members of the IMF. They get together regularly. We've watched a synchronized deflation. We've watched now we're watching a synchronized inflation. We watched synchronized money printing. Everything was synchronized. And all of a sudden it's not. And we're going from crisis to crisis. And you know what I'm curious about? And maybe you've spoken to somebody that knows about this. The lockdowns in China over the Omicron virus, I had it. It wasn't really I mean, if I hadn't tested because somebody else I knew had it, I wouldn't have even known. It was a slight stuffy nose.
I'm glad that you had a little reaction there, Lynette. So from what I'm hearing, it's all part of a greater monetary reset that's shifting, that's happening for you? Is that a correct statement?
That's what I believe is happening. And I could be totally wrong. Maybe all of a sudden, all of this division has come about, but I've just seen too much synchronization for too long to be absolutely convinced of that.
So let's bring it back because, like I said, you've been tweeting hashtag got gold, got gold, got gold. Why do you see gold as a solution here?
Because it's the only financial instrument that runs no counterparty risk, and everything that we're dealing with is all of this counterparty risk. It's the only financial asset that truly is invisible. Once you hold it, you own it outright, and it is proven for 6,000 years to fight inflation. It is proven to be, the Bank for International Settlements, gold held at home runs no political risk.
So I guess, what do you say to the folks, especially the cryptocurrency lovers, who will say, well, gold's just been dead money for 10 years, Lynette. I mean, the price hasn't moved.
Well, first of all, that's inaccurate. However, look, the people that love crypto and the people that love gold are really, they have the same mindset, and I get it. This is proven, and I'm sorry, but when I read that 1996 NSA white paper, which is a government agency on how to create a mint, describing this whole crypto market, and I look at Wall Street, and I look at the level of adoption, one thing I know, I'm not an engineer, I don't understand cryptos, but I have studied currency life cycles and their transitions into new currencies since 1987. And every single time, there are repeatable patterns. And a key one that I would say is that they allow people the general population, to make money as they're making this transition so that people go along with it. Look at the roaring 20s. Look at the greedy 80s. And look at the 2020s. That's a common thread.
It's interesting, and that's something that E.B. Tucker, another one of our guests who says that they're almost preparing us for the coming digital dollar. Is that how you see it?
100%.
And how far away is that reality for you?
What I know, timing is the biggest challenge, but what I do know is that a lot of things have to shift in 2023, including somewhere around 610 trillion in notional derivative contracts that are tied to LIBOR shifting into SOFR. And they're forcing that shift, even though when they ran that test in October, I think it was 2019, might have been 2020, I'm sorry about that. But when they ran that test with 80 trillion, it was a big fat fail. And you know that because it got really silent. And then 3 weeks later, they postponed it until 2023. And LIBOR does not work like, or rather SOFR does not work like LIBOR. So, I hope we have more time than that, but I could definitely see a crisis maybe a little bit before 2023 or in 2023.
That fast tracks it?
Mm-hmm.
Since you are a currency expert, Lynette, curious, and especially one that studies lifespans of the currencies. Mm-hmm. Let's go back to the U.S. dollar a second. There's a lot of talk about the future of the U.S. dollar as the reserve currency. Given the situation of Russia, Ukraine, we're seeing countries like Saudi Arabia looking outside of the U.S. dollar system, Israel now. So what direction do you see this headed in?
Well, I think that the SDR is the most likely candidate to take over as the world reserve currency. So all of those dollars that are held in all of those foreign central banks, that's got to come home. And the way that they'll most likely do it is by depositing them into the IMF's, International Monetary Fund's, the special account that they set up to convert dollar assets into SDR assets, so that in theory, the IMF can determine the speed at which the dollars come back to the U.S. But yeah, we're going to suffer the most in the U.S. because we're losing that status.
Right. And so, I always want to be able to empower our viewers, educate them, give them the tools in preparation for the landscape that you see coming, right?
Oh, wow.
So
Yeah.
if we had to really give takeaway advice, right? Real things we can do after this interview. What are, 3 things you'd be looking at?
Well, I would definitely be securing any wealth that I hold in the system, with gold and also physical silver. Okay, so you definitely need those in your possession. Secondly, food becomes the single biggest issue for people through this transition. So you need to secure your food source. I've done gardens, but there's all different ways that you can do it. But you definitely, absolutely, 100% need to secure your food. And only 3. If I only get 3, then the third one would be community. And I'm not sure that shouldn't be, maybe not the first one, but definitely
Up there. Yeah.
coming together with your neighbors, making sure you know your neighbors, making sure that you are part of a community, maybe in a community garden is great, so that you have a variety of skill sets to come together and help each other through this mess.
Absolutely. And so sad that sense of community, I believe, is the greatest loss of, that happened during, of course, besides lives, but during the pandemic, right, Lynette, that we lost that sense of community.
Yes. And things have changed. I remember back in the 70s, you knew your neighbors. Everybody was, the doors were open. Everybody was in and out of everybody else's house. And since the 70s, really, these things are planned, and you can look at the breakdown in the family system, in a lot of the systems to divide us. And with all of the technology, there's a lot of great things about technology, but there's also some things that are not great. I know I look at my grandkids. Well, we used to meet with our friends every day if we could, and hang out with them and do stuff and what have you. Well, I go over to their house and they're all on their computers. Don't you want to go play with your friends or get together with your friends? Or well, we are. Yeah. We're on the computer. It's very different. Yeah. And so, the breakdown of community.
I have a no iPad rule in this house. For the kids. So that speaks to me right there. But getting back to your first point, because I know we've spoken about this and I know it resonated with so many audience members about diversifying outside of the system. And, I think it's a good point to bring up that you always think, well, am I really going to have to? Do I really need to? Is it really going to happen? And, just look at what's happening in Ukraine, where people, weren't able to access cash, right? And they have to use, whether you're a believer or not in cryptos or the metals, but they have to go outside the system.
Right. And look at Canada.
Right. And look at Canada.
Okay, that was a war. Well, there's, is Canada inside of a war? No. But they didn't like your politics? Bam. Cut you right off. Well, what are you going to do? I can always convert this to any of the current fiat money system. That's easy peasy.
I'll leave you the final word, Lynette. Everyone always just listens to every single word. So just final thoughts for our viewers.
Honestly, things are heating up, and it should be really apparent to everybody that things are moving really quickly, and we are going from crisis to crisis to crisis to crisis. Don't buy into it. Gold, silver, physical in your possession will enable you to survive anything. It'll enable you to buy what you need. But you need to be prepared with food, water, energy security, barterability, wealth preservation, community, and shelter. And we just recently opened up a new YouTube on the rest of the mantra to help people at any level that they are. Our goal is to build a really comprehensive library so that wherever you're at, whatever your budget is, whatever your skill set is, there's something to address that, so you can be as independent and self-sufficient as possible through this mess.
There you go. Amen to that. Lynette Zhang. Talk about bringing it home. Thank you so much for joining us here today on Stansberry Research.
It's been my pleasure, Daniela. Thank you for having me.
We'll see you soon. We will see you soon. And be